Hi, I'm Charles from the CinemaCon channel, and today, like the last video, I'm going to continue reading this. You know the name of it. I'm going to read another 4 chapters, and the 4th one is chapter 15, which means after I read this, I'm halfway there. Only the most brutal part remains. Reading the 2nd part. Chapter 12. Jason. Jason had a small face and a big mouth. He had the 2nd biggest mouth in Mrs. Jewell's class. And there were an awful lot of big mouths in that class. Mrs. Jewell's, Jason called without raising his hand. Joy is chewing gum in class. Joy had the biggest mouth in Mrs. Jewell's class, and it was filled with gum. There was hardly any even room for her tongue. "Joy, I'm ashamed of you," said Mrs. Jewell's. "I'm afraid I'll have to put your name up on the board." "That's okay, Mrs. Jewell's," Jason called. "I'll do it." Jason hopped out of his seat and wrote Joy's name on the blackboard under the word discipline. While he was up, Joy took the glob of gum out of her mouth and placed it on Jason's chair. Rondi and Allison giggled. Jason walked back from the blackboard to his desk and sat down. "Mrs. Jewell's," he called. "I'm stuck." Rondi and Allison giggled again. Mrs. Jewell's got angry. "Joy, you're going home on the kindergarten bus today." "Oh, good," said Todd. "I'll have some company." Todd went home on the kindergarten bus every day. He could never seem to make it to 12 o'clock without getting into trouble 3 times. His name wasn't even up on the blackboard yet, but he knew that by 12 o'clock it would be up, checked and circled. "Mrs. Jewell's, what am I going to do? I'm stuck. I'm going to have to stay here for the rest of my life," said Jason. "Joy, tell Jason you're sorry," said Mrs. Jewell's. "I'm sorry, Jason," said Joy. "Oh, that's okay, Joy," said Jason. "I don't mind. Try to get up, Jason," said Mrs. Jewell's. Jason tried. "I can't. Mrs. Jewell's, I'm stuck." Mrs. Jewell's asked the 3 Erics to help. Eric Fry and Eric Ovens pulled Jason. Eric Bacon held the chair. "Stop!" cried Jason. "You'll rip my pants." Rondi and Allison giggled. "All right," said Mrs. Jewell's. "Let's try ice water. That should freeze the gum and make it less sticky. I'll go get some from Mrs. Mush." Miss Mush was the lunch teacher at Wayside School. She had the remarkable ability to undercook a dish and overcook it at the same time. Her specialty was a nice, hot bowl of mud. She called it porridge. Jason looked at Rondi and Allison. "No, Mrs. Jewell's," he said. "Don't leave me. Besides, Miss Mush's ice water is probably warm." "Don't be silly, Jason," said Mrs. Jewell's. "I'm sure it will be at least as cold as her soups." Rondi and Allison leered at Jason. "No, Mrs. Jewell's, don't go," begged Jason. "I'll be back, Jason," said Mrs. Jewell's. She went to Miss Mush for some ice water. As soon as Miss Jewell stepped out of the door, Rondi and Allison jumped from their seats and started to tickle Jason. He laughed until his hair turned purple. The girls got back to their seats just as Mrs. Jewell's returned. Mrs. Jewell's carried a big bucket of cold ice water. Oh no, please don't, no. Jason pleaded. We have no choice, said Mrs. Jules. She threw the water all over him. Well, said Mrs. Jules, try to get up. Jason was drenched. I'm wet, and I'm cold, and I'm still stuck. Oh well, it didn't work, said Mrs. Jules. At least we tried. Now I guess we'll have to cut off your pants. Rondi and Allison giggled. No, Mrs. Jules, no, Jason screamed. I don't mind being stuck here. I'm really very comfortable. Don't be silly, Jason, said Mrs. Jules. Don't cut off my pants, said Jason. The 3 Erics can carry you to the bathroom, said Mrs. Jules. I'll ask Louis to call your mother. She can bring you a new pair of pants. The 3 Erics took hold of Jason's chair and turned him upside down. No, Miss Jules, said Jason. Now I'll always have a place to sit down. I won't have to worry about finding a seat on the bus. The 3 Erics began to take him away. Wait, said Joy. Miss Jules, if I can get Jason unstuck, do I still have to go home on the kindergarten bus? All right, said Miss Jason. If you can somehow get Jason free, you don't have to go home early. Don't trust her, Miss Jules, said Jason. He was still hanging upside down. I'll just kiss him, said Joy. No, screamed Jason. Don't let her kiss me, Mrs. Jules. Throw water on me, tickle me, cut off my pants, hang me upside down from the ceiling, but don't let her kiss me. I'll just kiss him on the nose, said Joy. We've got nothing to lose, Jason, said Mrs. Jules. Ooh, who would want to kiss Jason? Said Allison. Jason hung helplessly upside down. Joy stepped up and kissed him on the nose. Jason fell out the chair and hit his head on the floor. Rondi and Allison giggled. Darn, said Todd. Now I'll have to go home alone again. Joy erased her name from the blackboard. Chapter 13. Rondi. Rondi had 22 beautiful teeth. Everyone else had 24. Rondi was missing her 2 front teeth, and those were the most beautiful teeth of all. Your front teeth are so cute, said Mrs. Jules. They make you look just adorable. But Mrs. Jules, said Rondi, I don't have any front teeth. I know, said Mrs. Jules. That's what makes them so cute. Rondi didn't understand. Oh, Rondi, I just love your 2 front teeth, said Mauricia. I wish I had some like that, but I don't have them, said Rondi. That's why I love them so much, said Mauricia. Oh, that's just silly, said Rondi. Everybody thinks the teeth I don't have are cute. I'm not wearing a coat. Don't you all just love my coat? And what about my 3rd arm? I don't have one. Isn't it lovely? Love your hat, Rondi, said Joy. I'm not wearing a hat, Rondi screamed. That's what makes it so interesting, said Joy. Don't you think so, Leslie? Oh, yes, said Leslie. It's a very nice hat. Nice boots, too. I'm not wearing boots, Rondi insisted. Yes, said Joy. Very nice boots. They go so well with your hat. What hat? Asked Rondi. Yes, Leslie agreed. Rondi showed excellent taste by not wearing the hat or the boots. They go so swell together. Rondi had had enough. She covered her head so nobody could see her hat. She put her feet under her desk so nobody could see her boots. Then she closed her mouth tightly so nobody could see her 2 front teeth. Suddenly, everyone who was sitting near her began to laugh. "What's so funny?" asked Todd. "The joke Rondi didn't tell," said Jason. "Ask Rondi not to tell it again, Todd," said Calvin. "Rondi," said Todd, "don't tell it again." Rondi was horrified. She didn't know what to do. She kept her mouth shut and just stared at Todd. To her amazement, Todd laughed. "Hey everybody," called Todd, "listen to Rondi's joke." Rondi didn't say a word, but the rest of the class began to laugh. Mrs. Jules got very angry. She wrote Rondi's name on the blackboard under the word discipline. "The class is not the place for jokes," she said. "But Mrs. Jules," said Rondi, "I didn't tell a joke." "Yes, I know," said Mrs. Jules, "but the funniest jokes are the ones that remain untold." Okay, said Rondi. "If that's what you want, then that's what you'll get. I'll really tell a joke. That way I won't disturb the class. And tomorrow I'll wear boots and a hat, of course. You won't like them as much as the ones I didn't wear today. But I better hurry up and tell my joke before you all start to laugh." There was a monkey sitting on a banana tree. He was very hungry. He knew that somewhere in the tree there was the magic banana, and that once he ate that banana, he wouldn't be hungry anymore. He ate one banana. That wasn't it. He was still hungry. He ate another banana. That one wasn't it either. He was still hungry. Finally, after he ate his 10th banana, he wasn't hungry anymore. "I knew I'd find it," he said. "It's too bad I didn't eat that first one. I wouldn't have had to waste all those other bananas." Nobody laughed. Nobody had even listened to Rondi. Miss Jules was busy teaching arithmetic, and everybody else was paying strict attention. Rondi slapped herself in the face to make sure she was really there. She was. The bell rang for recess. Rondi ran outside. She was very upset. Louis, the art teacher, saw her. "Why the frown, Rondi?" he asked. "Come on, smile. Let me see your cute front teeth," Rondi screamed. She socked Louis in the stomach, then bit his arm with her missing teeth. And that kind of bite hurts the worst. Chapter 14. Sammy. It was a horrible, stinky, rainy day. Some rainy days are fun and exciting, but not this one. This one stunk. All the children were wet and wore smelly raincoats. The whole room smelled awful. "Ooh, it stinks in here," said Mauricia. Everybody laughed, but she was right. There was one good thing, however. There was a new boy in class. New kids are always fun, except no one could tell what the new boy looked like. He was completely covered by his raincoat. "Class," said Mrs. Jules, "I'd like you all to meet Sammy. Let us show him what a nice class we can be." Leslie walked up and smiled at Sammy, but her smile quickly turned into a frown. "You smell terrible," she said. "Leslie!" exclaimed Mrs. Jules. "That's no way to greet a new member of our class." Miss Jules wrote Leslie's name on the blackboard under the word discipline. But he does, Mrs. Jules, said Leslie. He smells awful. You're ugly, Sammy replied. Now, Sammy, that's no way to talk, said Mrs. Jules. Leslie is a very pretty girl. She's ugly, said Sammy. Allison spoke up. Well, you smell terrible and are probably even uglier. Well, you smell terrible and are probably even uglier, but nobody can see you because you are hiding under that smelly old raincoat. That will be enough of that, said Mrs. Jules. Now, Sammy, why don't you take off your coat and hang it in the closet? Let us all see how nice you look. I don't want to, you old windbag, said Sammy. That's because he's so ugly, said Miss Leslie. I'm sure he's quite handsome, said Mrs. Jules. He's just shy. Here, let me help you. Miss Jules took off Sammy's raincoat for him, but underneath it was still another raincoat, even dirtier and smellier than the first one. And they couldn't see his face. Ooh. Oh, now he smells even worse, said Mauricia. You don't exactly smell like a rose either, Sammy replied. Mrs. Jules took off his second raincoat, but there was still another one under that. And the smell became so bad that Mrs. Jules had to run and stick her head out the window to get some fresh air. You smell like a bunch of pigs. You're all a bunch of pigs, Sammy screeched. Dirty, rotten pigs. The smell was overpowering. Sam just stood there under his raincoats. Mrs. Jules wrote Sammy's name under the word discipline. Send him home on the kindergarten bus, said Joy. Not with me, said Todd. Mrs. Jules held her nose, walked up to Sammy, and removed his raincoat. She threw it out the window, but he had on still another one. Sammy hissed, Hey, old windbag, watch where you throw my good clothes. Mrs. Jules put a check next to Sammy's name on the blackboard. Then she took off another raincoat and threw it out the window. The smell got worse, for he had on still another one. Sammy began to laugh. His horrible laugh was even worse than his horrible voice. When Sammy first came into the room, he was 4 feet tall. But after Mrs. Jules removed 6 of his raincoats, he was only 3 feet tall. And there were still more raincoats to go. Mrs. Jules circled his name and removed another coat. She threw it out the window. Then she put a triangle around the circle and threw another one of his raincoats out the window. She kept doing this until Sammy was only 1.5 feet tall. With every raincoat she took off, Sammy's laugh got louder and the smell worse. Some of the children held their ears. Others could hold only one ear because they were holding their nose with the other hand. It was hard to say which was worse, the laugh or the smell. Sammy stopped laughing and said, Hey, old windbag, if you take off one more of my coats and throw it out the window, I'll bite your head off. They smell too bad for me to allow them in my class room, said Mrs. Jules. You can pick them up when you leave. They smell better than you do, pighead, Sammy shouted. Miss Jules didn't stop. She took off another one of his raincoats, then another, and another, Sammy was only 4 inches tall, 3 inches tall, 2 inches tall, and at last, she removed the final raincoat. All that was there was a dead rat. Well, I don't allow dead rats in my classroom, said Miss Jules. She picked it up by the tail, put it in a plastic bag, and threw it away. Mrs. Jules didn't allow dead rats in her classroom. Todd once brought in a dead rat for show and tell, and Miss Jules made him throw that one away too. I'm glad Sammy isn't allowed in our classroom, said Rondi. I didn't like him very much. Yes, said Miss Jules. We caught another one. Dead rats were always trying to sneak into Miss Jules' class, and that's the third one she'd caught since September. Chapter 15. Dede. This story contains a problem and a solution. Dede was a mousy-looking kid. Unlike most children at Wayside School, she liked recess better than spelling. As soon as the recess bell rang, she would jump up from her seat and run out the door. There were big signs in Wayside School on every floor, no jumping down the stairs. Dede never seemed to notice the signs. She jumped down the stairs. Some children took the stairs 2 at a time. Dede took them 10 at a time. That was on the way down. It was funny. She never seemed to be quite the same hurry on the way back up. There was another sign at Wayside School. No cutting across the grass. Dede must not have ever seen that one either. She cut across the grass and ran up to Louis, the yard teacher. I want the green ball, Dede said. The green balls were the best. I'm all out of green balls, said Louis. Okay, then I want the red ball, said Dede. The red balls were just about as good as the green balls. They didn't bounce as high, but actually, sometimes you don't want a ball to bounce too high. I'm all out of red balls too, said Louis. Do you have anything left? Asked Dede. Dede meant anything besides the yellow ball. There was one yellow ball at Wayside School, and Louis was always trying to get rid of it. It didn't bounce, and it never went the way it was kicked. Anything at all? Asked Dede. Today's your lucky day, said Louis. I have one ball left, just for you. The one and only yellow ball. No thanks, said Dede. Oh, come on, take it. Why don't you ever have any green or red balls? Asked Dede. I do, said Louis, but the other children ask first. By the time you get out here, they're all gone. But that's because I have to come all the way from the 30th story. How do you expect me to compete with the kids from the first or second? She asked. That's why I saved you the yellow ball, said Louis. Everybody wanted it, but I saved it just for you. I bet, said Dede. She took the yellow ball and bounced it on the ground. It stopped dead with a thud. She stepped back, ran up, and kicked it. It went backwards over her head. She didn't bother chasing it. Instead, played hopscotch with Jenny and Leslie. She thought it was disgusting. The next day, Dede asked Miss Jules if she could go to recess early. Why? Said Mrs. Jules. So I can get the green ball before Louis gives them all away, said Dede. I'm glad you have a good reason, said Miss Jules. Yes, you may go, but first, Spell Mississippi for me." Spelling was not Dede's best subject. By the time she finally got it right, she was 5 minutes late for recess. She jumped down the stairs, cut across the grass, and ran up to Louis. There were no green balls left. There were no red balls left either. However, there was still the yellow ball. Dede played jump rope with Joy and Mauricia. It was no better than hopscotch. So Dede's problem was to figure out a way to get a green ball, or at least a red ball. You already know that this story also contains a solution. Dede figured it out. See if you can too. Remember everything you know about Dede, Wayside School, and Mrs. Jules. Hint: the next day, Dede brought a cream cheese and jelly sandwich, some nuts, and shredded cheese in her lunchbox. Here's what happened. Just before recess, Dede smeared the cream cheese and jelly all over her face. Then she stuffed her mouth with nuts and hung the shredded cheese from her nose. When she closed her eyes, she looked just like a dead rat. Todd was in on the plan. "Mrs. Jules," he called, "there's a dead rat in the classroom." Mrs. Jules was very put out. "I want that dead rat outside immediately." When Miss Jules said immediately, she meant it. Dede instantly found herself outside on the playground. "I want the green ball," she said. Louis pretended that he hadn't heard her. "May I please have the green ball?" asked Dede. Louis gave her the green ball. "I don't know how you did it, Dede, but you're the first today," he said. When Miss Jules found out that Dede and Todd had tricked her, she sent Todd home early on the kindergarten bus. Dede threw the green ball on the ground. It bounced 50 feet straight up into the air, and then she caught it. "You don't like me, do you?" She asked Louis. "Sure I do," said Louis. "No you don't," said Dede. "Yes I do," said Louis. "No you don't," Dede insisted. "Yes I do, I really do," said Louis. "Are you sure?" asked Dede. "Yes," said Louis. "Don't you believe me?" "I guess so," said Dede. "Do you like me?" asked Louis. "You bet," said Dede. "You're my best friend." "Terrific," said Louis. "I always wanted to be best friends with a dead rat."